He was the face of New York grit.
Basketball is back in New York City, my friend.
A 7-foot warrior who carried the Knicks through every era of heartbreak. Patrick Ewing was never just a player, he was an institution. He fought against the best, bled for the Garden, and walked away ringless, but never defeated. Yet behind those clenched jaws and ice-cold stares was a man who valued something deeper than trophies. Beneath every elbow and roar was loyalty, friendship, and love. This is the countdown of the 7 players Patrick Ewing loved the most, and the stories that proved it. Before we start the countdown, let's set the stage. To understand the men Ewing loved, you have to understand his code: toughness, respect, and loyalty. If you fought with integrity, you had his heart forever. If you competed until your lungs gave out, he'd defend you to his last breath. Every man on this list earned his affection through pain, sweat, and history. So, let's begin. At the top of the list is Michael Jordan, the one man who could break Patrick's heart and still make him smile. Long before their fierce playoff battles defined an era, there was a quieter story that most fans never heard. It was the early 1980s, a time when high school basketball was bursting with future legends. 2 young phenoms, Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing, met as high school recruits.
I mean, you guys met as high school recruits.
The Tar Heels wanted both of them. They walked the same campus, breathed the same crisp Carolina air, and unknowingly stood on the edge of history. Dean Smith, already a coaching genius, saw something special in both. He looked at Patrick Ewing, tall, serious, and focused even as a teenager, and gave him a single piece of advice that would change basketball forever. He said, "If you're not coming here, you should go to Georgetown." Ewing listened. That one sentence didn't just influence a career, it reshaped the sport itself. Imagine the alternate world that never happened. Ewing standing next to Jordan, James Worthy, and Sam Perkins in Tar Heel blue. It would have been unfair. A dynasty before its time. Instead, fate split them apart. Michael stayed home, became Carolina's hero, and soon the face of Nike and Chicago. Patrick followed his instincts north to Georgetown, where John Thompson molded him into a defensive force, a warrior in sneakers. From that moment, their paths were intertwined like 2 sides of the same coin, destined to meet, destined to clash. As years rolled by, those college boys became professional titans. The 1989 playoffs, then 1992, 1993, and 1996. Each year, another war between the New York Knicks and the Chicago Bulls. Madison Square Garden against the United Center, grit against glamour, and in the middle of it all, Patrick versus Michael. Jordan taunted him relentlessly. He would score, smirk, and whisper something that only Ewing could hear. Then he would laugh as he backpedaled on defense. It wasn't cruelty, it was competition in its purest form. During the last dance, Ewing reflected with a grin, saying, "That's just Michael. He's the biggest trash talker. If I call him right now, he will still be talking trash to me."
Call him right now. He'll still be talking trash to me.
He meant it with love. Their rivalry was brutal. Every series ended the same way. Ewing battered and heartbroken, Jordan victorious and grinning. But even in defeat, Patrick never lost respect. He told reporters, "I never hated Michael. He's my friend. He made me better." That simple sentence revealed more than any stat sheet ever could. Off the court, the 2 shared laughter during Dream Team practices, representing the red, white, and blue. They cracked jokes, played cards,
I don't know when he's coming back.
and respected each other as equals. Ewing never complained about being overshadowed. He admired Jordan's killer instinct because he recognized it in himself. Michael Jordan was the rival who broke his heart, yet also the mirror that reflected his own greatness. In a world obsessed with trophies, Patrick Ewing's love for Jordan wasn't about defeat. It was about honoring excellence, even when it came at his expense. And that quiet admiration, buried beneath decades of competition, became one of basketball's most human stories. In second place is Hakeem Olajuwon, the mirror image of Ewing's own soul. 2 giants with Nigerian roots, both born to dominate, both gentle off the court, but ruthless between the lines. Their rivalry began in college when Georgetown faced Houston in the 1984 NCAA Final. Ewing's Hoyas won that night, but the dream left an impression he'd never forget. A decade later, destiny reunited them on basketball's biggest stage, the 1994 NBA Finals. 7 games of sheer willpower. Hakeem versus Patrick, footwork versus power, poise versus persistence. Hakeem had the edge, but Ewing never showed bitterness. When reporters asked about Hakeem Olajuwon, he called him a great talent.
Olajuwon, great talent, the dream shape.
Olajuwon also said in interviews that he loved every battle with Patrick. Playing New York twice a year wasn't enough. When we met in the finals, I finally got to know his game. Patrick pushed me to be better. There it was again, that mutual respect that defined the greatest big men of their era. No insults, no drama, just craft, competition, and admiration. Ewing and Hakeem represented something basketball rarely sees anymore: dignity in rivalry. Each knew what it meant to carry a franchise, each understood the weight of leadership, and both did it with grace. Ewing once said, "If I couldn't win, I'm glad Hakeem did." It wasn't surrender, it was honor. That's love between warriors who left everything on the floor. Alonzo Mourning takes the 3rd spot, a man who went from student to rival to something far deeper.
Of the matchup between Patrick Ewing and Alonzo Mourning.
Their story began at Georgetown University in the early 1980s, when Coach John Thompson was building what would become a dynasty of centers. Thompson had already molded Patrick Ewing into a national champion, an intimidating defensive presence, and the heart of his team. When Ewing graduated and left for the National Basketball Association, Thompson famously told his next prized recruit, "I need a bull, not a butterfly." That recruit was a tall, intense teenager named Alonzo Mourning. Ewing saw himself in the young center from Virginia, fiery, physical, and unbreakable. He helped recruit him, trained with him, and mentored him through the brutal expectations that came with being a Hoya big man. Their practice sessions were legendary around campus. The scrimmages were so aggressive that players would leave the gym covered in bruises. It was Georgetown's way: tough love, relentless repetition, and pride in the paint. Ewing knew that Mourning would continue what he started. Years later, that mentorship evolved into something no one could have predicted. By the mid-1990s, the two former teammates were now on opposing sides of one of the most heated rivalries in basketball history: the New York Knicks versus the Miami Heat. The drama intensified after Coach Pat Riley, once Ewing's sideline general in New York, defected to Miami. He took Ewing's defensive blueprints with him, teaching Mourning the same system that Ewing had mastered. Suddenly, brotherhood became warfare. Those games were not for the faint of heart. Hard fouls, technicals, and near brawls turned every possession into a statement of pride. The atmosphere inside Madison Square Garden and the Miami Arena was electric, fueled by pure animosity. And yet, underneath that animosity lay an unspoken respect. Every Knicks fan remembers the moment that defined the rivalry: assistant coach Jeff Van Gundy clinging desperately to Alonzo Mourning's leg as players scrambled to separate a scuffle. On television, it looked like hatred, but behind the scenes, it was something else entirely. Both men had been forged in the same Georgetown fire, molded by the same coach, and built on the same principles: strength, loyalty, and heart. Then, in the year 2000, everything changed. Mourning was diagnosed with a rare and life-threatening kidney disease. Suddenly, basketball didn't matter. One of the league's fiercest warriors was fighting for his life. And who was one of the first to visit him? Patrick Ewing. Reports later revealed that Ewing had offered to donate one of his own kidneys. Doctors declined the offer, citing his high blood pressure, but the gesture stunned everyone. The man who once battled Mourning in violent playoff series was willing to sacrifice part of himself to save his former rival. When asked about it, Ewing spoke quietly but firmly. "He's my brother, we'll always be family." Alonzo later named Patrick Ewing as the godfather to his son.
He better be a future Hoya.
In 4th place, we have Allen Iverson, the smallest man to carry Ewing's enormous heart into a new generation. Years after Patrick left Georgetown, a lightning fast, guard arrived with braids, swagger, and a chip on his shoulder. Allen Iverson was chaos and beauty combined. Many called him controversial. Ewing called him a warrior. When Iverson faced scrutiny for his past, Ewing defended him. In a 1996 interview with the Washington Post, he said, "He's got the heart of a lion. He's the next warrior." That wasn't just praise, It was a public blessing from Georgetown's greatest son. Iverson, years later, said in an alumni interview, "Pat paved the way for all of us. He made Georgetown what it is." Their bond was spiritual, a passing of the torch between two men who turned pain into performance. Both were doubted, both carried cities, and both refused to change who they were. Ewing saw in Iverson the same fire that once burned inside him. For all his fame and controversies, Iverson embodied Ewing's code: loyalty to the game, resilience in adversity, and faith in himself. That's why Ewing loved him. Not because of size or stats, but because Iverson carried Georgetown's heartbeat into a new era. Next, at 5th place, we have Larry Johnson, the man who taught Patrick that enemies can become brothers. Before sharing a locker room, they shared animosity. Johnson was the brash star of the Charlotte Hornets, famous for his gold tooth, trash talk, and chest-thumping celebrations. The Knicks and Hornets met often, and Ewing hated his showmanship. Then, in 1996, a shocking trade brought LJ to New York. Fans wondered if the two alpha personalities would explode. Instead, something unexpected happened. They clicked. Ewing realized Johnson's attitude hid pain and pride. Johnson played through chronic back injuries, yet never quit. During the 1999 playoffs, Ewing watched from the sidelines, nursing his own injury, as Johnson hit the most iconic shot of his career, a 4-point play against Indiana that sent Madison Square Garden into hysteria. Cameras caught Ewing roaring with joy, waving a towel like a proud father. Later, he said, "That's my brother in battle." It was the purest form of respect, earned through struggle. Johnson's toughness reminded Ewing of himself. They didn't need words, they just understood each other. Sliding into the 6th place, we have Patrick Ewing Jr., the one name that brought tears to the Giants' eyes.
And also looking at my son,
For decades, Patrick Ewing Sr. was known as the protector, the leader, and the mentor. He was the man who stood in front of every camera, took every headline, and carried every ounce of pressure for the city of New York. But with his son, he wasn't the Hall of Famer or the franchise savior. He was simply Dad. Patrick Jr. grew up in a world that most basketball fans could only dream of. He spent his childhood in NBA locker rooms, surrounded by living legends. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird were not posters on his wall. They were the men he saw joking with his father after games. He once told a story that perfectly captured how normal that extraordinary world felt to him. In elementary school, a teacher asked the class what they did over the weekend. Patrick Jr. said, almost casually, "I played video games with Dad's friend Chris Webber." His classmates gasped. One shouted, "You played with Michael Jordan." Patrick laughed as he told the story years later. "I didn't understand the big deal," he said. To him, those icons were family friends, not untouchable superstars. Despite being surrounded by greatness, Ewing Sr. never pushed basketball on his son. He knew the pressure that came with the family name and didn't want that weight on Patrick Jr.'s shoulders. He warned him that the comparisons would be brutal, that every rebound and every missed shot would be judged against one of the top 50 players in NBA history. But Patrick Jr. couldn't stay away. The game wasn't just in his blood, it was in his heartbeat. He worked in silence, driven not by fame but by legacy. He trained through high school and college, carving his own identity without asking for shortcuts. Finally, in the year 2008, his dedication paid off. The Sacramento Kings called his name in the 2nd round of the NBA draft. Cameras caught Patrick Sr. smiling wider than he ever did after any Knicks victory. The man who had spent his career holding back tears on national television finally let his emotions show. For him, that moment meant more than any all-star selection or playoff run. He later said in an interview, "To see him make it, even for a moment, that was everything." For a man who had defined toughness for an entire generation, that sentence revealed his soul. The proudest statistic of his life wasn't his career points or rebounds, it was fatherhood. Patrick Jr.'s NBA career was brief, but it carried enormous meaning. He later transitioned into coaching, serving as an assistant in the Canadian Elite Basketball League. His presence on the sideline kept the Ewing name alive in professional basketball. During an interview, Patrick Sr. said softly, "My legacy continues." You could hear the pride in his voice. For a player who had fought everyone, from Michael Jordan to Hakeem Olajuwon, Patrick Ewing Sr. melted for his son. In a life measured by wins and losses, that was his greatest victory. And finally, in 7th place, we have Reggie Miller, the man every New Yorker loved to hate, and the one Patrick Ewing learned to love back. The 1990s Knicks versus Pacers rivalry was pure theater, an emotional roller coaster that defined an era of basketball when every foul was personal and every possession felt like a war. Reggie Miller was the perfect villain for New York City. He thrived on booze, taunted the crowd, and made Madison Square Garden his personal stage. He talked trash with Spike Lee from the baseline, made the infamous choke gesture that sent shockwaves across television screens, and in one of the most shocking moments in playoff history, scored 8 points in 9 seconds to steal Game 1 of the 1995 Eastern Conference semifinals. The Knicks fans were stunned. Patrick Ewing, the team's heart and soul, was devastated. But here's where the story turns. What the fans saw as hate was actually mutual respect in disguise. Behind the jawing, behind the glare, behind every hard foul, there was admiration between two men who understood exactly what it meant to carry a franchise on their backs. Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing were cut from the same cloth, loyal, unbreakable, and obsessed with winning for their cities. Both were stars who endured heartbreak after heartbreak, coming close but never quite reaching the ultimate goal, and yet neither ever left their teams. Ewing understood the grind of being the face of a franchise, the one who took the blame when the team fell short. Reggie understood it too. They both stood tall through boos, losses, and national criticism. When the dust of rivalry settled and retirement came, something deeper remained: respect. Years after they had both hung up their sneakers, Reggie Miller stunned fans with an Instagram tribute that rewrote the narrative. "Yes, oil and water do sometimes mix," he wrote. "Patrick's Knicks and my Pacers went for the jugular every time, but I have so much respect for Patrick because of his immense heart for the game. Iron sharpens iron." The comments section exploded with nostalgia and surprise. Even Patrick smiled when reporters read it to him. He simply said, "Reggie's one of my favorites because he never backed down." That one sentence captured everything. For Patrick Ewing, love didn't always come wrapped in warmth or friendship. Sometimes it came through blood, sweat, and battle. Sometimes it looked like standing across from your enemy, taking his best shot, and shaking his hand afterward. That was the beauty of Ewing and Miller. Two warriors who fought like enemies, but ended as brothers in respect. Now step back and look at this list. Jordan, Olajuwon, Mourning, Iverson, Johnson, Ewing Jr., and Miller. 7 men, 7 reflections of one principle: respect through battle. Ewing's story has always been told through the lens of what he didn't have, a championship ring. But maybe we've been looking at it wrong. What he built instead was a brotherhood that outlasts banners. Each relationship told a chapter of who Ewing was. He wasn't the loudest, flashiest, or most decorated star, but in every handshake, every bruise, every quiet word after the buzzer, he showed what greatness really means. He was loyal when others weren't. He respected the game when the game broke his heart, and he loved his rivals as deeply as he loved his family. So when people mock his empty fingers or ask why he never won a ring, remember this countdown. Because if love, loyalty, and legacy counted as championships, Patrick Ewing would be the greatest of them all. And here's the question for you. In a sport obsessed with stats and trophies, what lasts longer? A ring that shines for a decade, or respect that echoes forever? That's the real story of Patrick Ewing. 7 names, 7 battles, 1 heart that never stopped giving.